I recently mentioned in a video how I'm a big fan of Alpha Flight, so I thought we'd go over the founding members. Keyword, founding. So I'm sorry Wolverine, Vindicator, Captain Marvel, Talisman, Pathway, Beta Ray Bill, and U.S. Agent, as you won't be included. As no matter how much I love those characters, they weren't founding members. This will only be part 1 of 2, so today we're only going over Guardian, Northstar, Snowbird, and Aurora. And I think something very interesting about this team is how they aged, as they're all created to be a group of Canadian stereotypes, but a lot of these no longer work as that. Best example is Snowbird. She's named after a 80s song from a Canadian singer. But, well, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think anyone remembers that song. Meanwhile, Aurora Northstar's names, while we're meant to be mocking of Canadian star crap, they both just kind of fit their characters now, and their power set. Also, I myself am Canadian, so this is going to be really fun to make. Guardian, the original team leader, is meant to be Captain America, but Canada. But he's not called Captain Canada for some reason. Instead, they called him Guardian. I'm not too sure why they called him Guardian, but they did. I'm not entirely sure if that has any relation to anything Canadian related. Like, it could have been something like Snowbird, has to be due to the time. I don't know. I couldn't find it anywhere. James Hudson, aka the Guardian, despite being the first team leader, wasn't the last. In fact, he wasn't even the leader for that long. He was killed off just 12 issues into the Alpha Flight's first solo series. That's pretty quickly. Think of if Iron Man got killed off 12 issues in the Avengers comics. Wow. Guardian will be replaced by his wife, Heather Hudson, as leader. And no offense to James, I just think she's a better character overall, as she had a much longer run. As well, he did appear in flashbacks and would have appearances in, daydreams, etc. He was a very, I would say, big character in this run despite being dead, as in his death kind of lingered in the series. It reminded the characters that death is imminent. It's a similar thing I think Gwen Stacy's death is in the Spider-Man comics. So I think Guardian, in my opinion, he's really just a plot device at the end of the day, as unlike Gwen Stacy, she had a lot of character development, and continued a character development post her death. But Guardian only was around for 12 issues, where he was just really the standard leader who was all go-lucky and trying to... Maybe that's a Canadian stereotype. Anyways, he was just trying to gather the team together, who genuinely just didn't really work together that well. Well, they did, kinda, but they genuinely had, their differences before he died, which would unite them. So, overall, his character wasn't meant to do much. He would be brought back in Chaos War from the early 2000s, which he died in the 80s, by the way, so he was dead for a really long time. And he would rejoin Alpha Flight and become co-leader with his wife. He'd also join Omega Flight with Beta Ray Bill and U.S. Agent. I don't know why, but then that would get absorbed into Alpha Flight, but Beta Ray Bill and U.S. Agent would just dip for some reason. He would also struggle when he comes back to learn that he no longer has custody over his daughter. As you know, he was dead. And also, I couldn't find any existence of his daughter before this storyline, so I don't know if that was a retcon or not. Well, I think Guardian has a very cool design, although yet again, I am Canadian, so I'm very biased. But character-wise, I think he's one of the lamer Alpha Flight members. I thought Heather made a much better leader. They both have the same powers, and that is this special suit that gives them this yellow energy power and ability to fly. And yeah, it's not really explained why the suit does that. It's just does. It's don't ask questions. Overall, I think Guardian is really an odd character because people always remember him as being the first leader and think of him as probably the biggest Alpha Flight member. Well, biggest known Alpha Flight member, because for example, Northstar and Wolverine were also members, but they're not usually associated with this group. Guardian is. So I think it's really interesting that a lot of people usually see him as the go-to leader, but he was hardly ever the leader. Anyways, let's continue on. The next character I want to talk about is Snowbird. She is a character I've mentioned multiple times before I really like. Narya, aka Snowbird, is a demigod, which unlike other superhero gods, like Thor and Hercules, there has never ever actually been a story about a god named Snowbird. That is because she is actually named after a song, like I said before. She has the power to transform into any animal she wants with an albino complexion. Unfortunately, too, she would be killed off pretty quickly, but wasn't really either. She instead was let into the afterlife, but not for long, and would be killed again by the collective, but would too be brought back during the Chaos War, which her death happened a lot closer to Chaos War, to the point where on multiple internet webs I found doing research for this video didn't even consider it a real death. She was literally only dead for like 2 issues. Snowbird was, while long lasting on the team compared to Guardian, she didn't make that big of an impression to a lot of fans. My personal reason for why I like the character is because of her power set and connection to the gods. I think it gives Alpha Flight a very strong connection to other characters like Thor and Hercules. But overall, Snowbird, in my opinion, despite the fact I really like her, doesn't really have much on the table when it comes down to storylines. There was a point in time where she couldn't leave Canada for reasons, because of magic. Don't ask questions. It's not really ever been explored why her character doesn't exist in the real world when it comes to different tales. I think that could be an interesting idea, that she is a god, but an unknown one, that nobody knows who she really is, which I think could be a really interesting idea to play with, but never has been done. So that's just, my take on Snowbird. What's yours? I personally really like her, and I'm kind of sad that she isn't used enough. The next character I want to talk about is Aurora, aka Jeannie Paul. She's a character who, while started off as an Alpha Flight member, which I'm certain a lot of people know about, she also has a long-running stand on the X-Men, with her being a mutant, so she gets top billing in other comic books over other members because, like I said, she's a mutant, and mutants have a lot of comic book stories about them, so of course she's going to be a part of them. She has the ability to fly, has super speed, and has blast powers. She would have dealt with depression and suicidal thoughts during her childhood to adulthood, and she had a really weird connection with Sasquatch at one point on the team, but that didn't really go anywhere. She is tied with Puck and Sasquatch for having the longest running time as a member out of the originals, while Heather has the longest overall. In my opinion, I really like Aurora, but she's usually overshadowed by her brother, who we're about to talk about next. I think Aurora has potential, but isn't really used anymore. She was a part of the whole Captain Marvel Alpha Flight team, but in my opinion, while I thought that run was okay, it was more about Captain Marvel. It wasn't about Aurora, Sasquatch, Puck, or the others. So in my opinion, I really like Aurora, and I would like to see her do more. I really like her costume, too. I think her and her brother's costumes are honestly really cool looking. I know they're basic, but I think they're cool. Well, their original costumes, I mean, of course, not their newer ones. I'm not the biggest fan of their newer ones. I think overall she has a very cool look, and I think she has a very cool power set, even if it is kind of basic. And now on to probably the most popular member of Alpha Flight. Well, one of the most popular members, the most popular founding member. And that is Northstar, aka Jean Paul. Yes, he has the same name as his sister, except genderized by Jeannie, but Jeannie is still the long form of Jean. It's also spelled usually how the feminine version of Jean is spelled. Anyways, which actually, in my opinion, isn't that weird, but naming your kids, who are twins, the same name is just really weird to me. Anyways, Northstar probably is the most well-known founding member of Alpha Flight, but Wolverine overall is probably the most popular. Northstar is actually Marvel's first gay character, and the first gay character to be married, but also has a strong comic book history overall, but the character's evolution through his confidence and personality is very interesting. Northstar is close to his sister, almost Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver level close, not ultimate versions of them. You hell no. Northstar was actually originally a villain. Kinda. We didn't see him as a villain, but we get told that he used to be a villain with his powers. But he got redeemed and was now part of the Alpha Flight team. It's confusing, but yeah. Northstar has the same powers as his sister, but unlike her, has a much longer time on the X-Men, to the point where he actually left Alpha Flight altogether, and the character overall now is thought as an X-Men character, not an Alpha Flight character. Well, of course, I would say that a lot of comic book fans know of him from Alpha Flight. A lot of Northstar fans are usually coming from X-Men now. He also has joined the Avengers at one point, And yeah, so it's really interesting. Overall, I think it's really interesting also to think about how the X-Men, him being part of the X-Men, is really interesting because his evolution as a character started from being Elf Flight to X-Men, and that's where a lot of people know of him from now on. But it reminds me a lot of how Captain America is usually seen as the first leader of the Avengers, when it was actually Iron Man. And Captain America was only a leader after for a few years, until it was the Wasp, then Spectrum, then back to Captain America. Anyways, Northstar has actually recently become the leader of X Factor, in a costume I personally really dislike. I like his original one a lot more, but either way, I'm really excited for it, as I really, really like Northstar. I think he's, in my opinion, one of my favorite queer characters in comic books altogether. Probably one of my favorite characters in comics altogether. Although I've not yet read his solo series, which did come out in the 90s. Although after reading up on it, nothing really that big for the character happens. It's more like a side journey for his character. So I'm not going to go over it in this portion of the video. But if you want an entire video on that solo series, I'll go ahead and read it and I'll report back to you. Because I really like Northstar, and I'm becoming a much bigger Northstar fan after doing these videos about doing research on the character. And that's it. Please like, subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.